He was always the quiet type, not shy, just silent, like he knew the world didn't need more noise unless it had something real to say. Elijah Brooks lived on the scrappy side of Baton Rouge, tucked behind a tire shop and a faded mural of Louis Armstrong that had seen better days. His apartment was small, the kind where sound traveled faster than air, and the arguments of neighbors became part of your daily soundtrack. His mom, Charlene, worked long hours at the clinic just to keep the lights on, and his brother Isaiah had one foot out the door chasing thrills Elijah didn't want anything to do with. Elijah didn't ask for much. All he wanted was time with the busted keyboard at the rec center, the one missing 3 keys and hissing with static if you dared wiggle the plug. It wasn't fancy, but it sang when he touched it. He played what he felt. No sheet music, no lessons, just raw emotion molded into sound. It was the one thing in his life that didn't need permission to exist. At school, Elijah was the kid teachers often forgot to call on. He wasn't a troublemaker, but he also wasn't the kid who raised his hand or shouted answers. Most classmates barely registered him unless they needed help copying homework or wanted someone to mock. That invisibility suited him fine most days. The only person who really seemed to notice was Ms. Delacroix, the music teacher at Martin Luther King Jr. Middle. She had this way of hearing the stuff between the notes, the things he didn't know how to say out loud. She once listened to him improvise a melody for a class assignment and told him, "You hear the world like it's a symphony. Don't ever let someone turn down your volume." That stuck with him. So when an announcement crackled through the PA about a joint arts day with Bayside Prep, Elijah actually lifted his head. Bayside wasn't just any school. It was the kind you only saw in brochures, the type with stone fountains and libraries that smelled like old money. Rumor had it, every music room came with a baby grand piano. Elijah had never touched a real one, not even once. The closest he got was peering through the window of a music store downtown, nose pressed to the glass like a kid in a snow globe. The night before the trip, Charlene pulled out his best button-down and ironed it flat, pausing only to remind him, not to embarrass her or act like you ain't never seen nice things before. He promised he'd behave. He meant it too. But music had a way of making him forget his promises. The next morning, the bus pulled through Bayside's wrought iron gates, and Elijah might as well have landed on Mars. Everything was manicured, symmetrical and serene. Students walked in cliques, wearing matching navy jackets like armor, all hair-gelled and confident. Elijah clutched his backpack tighter, trying not to stare too hard at the buildings that looked like they belonged in a movie. Inside, the halls were spotless, so clean they felt off-limits. Light bounced off the polished floors and echoed down. The wide corridors lined with student art hung like museum pieces. One painting had a $200 price tag. Elijah blinked. He could draw too, but no one at his school ever put a price on it. They gathered in a sleek auditorium with plush seats and overhead lighting that made everyone look like they belonged on a stage. An older man with a smooth voice gave a speech about unity through the arts. Elijah counted 5 black students, including himself in a sea of khakis and pearls. The Bayside Jazz Ensemble performed next. They were talented, crisp, every note exactly where it was supposed to be. But to Elijah, it felt hollow. There was no grit, no soul, just polish. Afterward, the students split into workshops. Elijah's group was assigned to songwriting in room 208. The room was something out of a magazine. Glass walls, soundproof panels, every instrument in pristine condition. But Elijah only had eyes for one thing, the piano. A gleaming black Steinway Grand. It looked like it breathed power. He couldn't stop staring. He stepped closer, just enough to feel its presence, when a voice sliced through the room. "Don't even think about it." Elijah turned. A tall boy with slicked blonde hair stood nearby, arms crossed, smirking. "That piano? My dad donated it. Doubt you've seen anything like it where you're from." Elijah blinked. "I wasn't gonna break it." "You sure?" the boy said, voice dipped in syrupy disdain. Those keys weren't made for dirty fingers. The words hit harder than he expected. A few students nearby snickered. Heat rose up Elijah's neck, but he didn't respond. He didn't trust his voice to come out right. He could have walked away, probably should have. But when someone else chuckled behind him, that invisible line inside him snapped. He moved toward the piano. The blond boy's smirk twitched. His friends shifted awkwardly, clearly not expecting this. Elijah sat down on the bench, spine straight, fingers resting above the keys like he belonged there all along. The room quieted. Not entirely silent, but the kind of quiet that comes when everyone's breath catches. He didn't rush. He started with a single note, then another, then a chord. His hands moved instinctively, building something tender, then bold, then aching. He didn't know what the song was. He'd never written it down, but he knew how it felt. Like all the nights he stayed up listening to the hum of the freeway and the buzz of a city that never quite rested. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was just trying to feel something that wasn't fear or anger or loneliness. The music poured out, and the room transformed. Students who had been chatting fell still. Even the ones who'd been snickering stared in silence. The blond boy's eyes narrowed, but his jaw clenched differently now. Like maybe, just maybe, he was second-guessing himself. Elijah lost track of time. His hands were flying now, striking, chords like flint, drawing out sparks that made the hair on his arms rise. It wasn't flawless, but it was real, honest. When he stopped, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, charged. A girl in the back whispered, "Damn." Others clapped slowly, then louder. Even the blond boy's friend muttered, "Okay, that was actually kind of amazing." The door creaked open. The instructor finally arrived, blinking at the sudden attention. "Did I miss something?" A student, near the front, nodded. "Yeah, you really did." Elijah stood, quietly sliding the bench back. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The music had already spoken. In the hallway, he wasn't alone. A small crowd had gathered, students from other rooms, a few curious teachers. Miss Delacroix stood at the back, her hand over her mouth. When she approached, her voice was soft. "That was you? You played that?" Elijah nodded. "That was yours?" Another nod. She looked at him like he'd just rewritten gravity. "People will remember that, Elijah." He didn't know what to say. Another woman approached. Tall, sharp suit, clipboard tucked under one arm. "I'm Mrs. Coldwell," she said. "I run the advanced music program here. I heard you from down the hall." She knelt slightly to meet his eyes. "You ever taken lessons?" He shook his head. "Where'd you learn to play like that?" "Just practice," he mumbled. "The rec center, sometimes at home." She smiled. That wasn't practice. That was purpose. Behind her, the blond boy emerged from the classroom. Preston. His smirk was gone. He looked like he wanted to say something, maybe apologize, maybe pretend none of it happened. But instead, he just gave a small, awkward shrug and looked away. Miss Delacroix asked if Elijah wanted to play at the closing performance later that day. "They save a slot for a guest student. I think you should take it." His stomach flipped. His heart wanted to say no, but something else, something deeper, told him this moment wouldn't come again. He nodded. Okay. The rest of the day blurred. Rehearsals, quiet corridors, long pauses where his breath caught in his throat. He waited backstage, staring at the stage floor, clutching every ounce of courage he had. His shirt from the morning still clung to his back, collar damp with fresh sweat. The tremble in his fingers wasn't because of the keys, those he trusted. It was the eyes, the ones watching, expecting, judging. That's what made his stomach tighten. Miss Delacroix appeared beside him, calm and steady. "They're going to love you," she said gently. His voice barely rose. "What if I mess up?" "You won't," she said, then smiled. "And even if you do, they'll feel it." Something in that stuck with him. The announcer took the mic, tall, glasses shining under the lights, voice clean and practiced. "To close our program, please welcome a special guest from Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School, Elijah Brooks, performing an original piece." Applause followed, light but respectful. Elijah walked out slowly, no glance to the audience. He didn't need to see them. He had already heard them in his head. The piano stood waiting. He sat, exhaled once, let his fingers settle, and played. It wasn't the melody from before. This one moved like memory, soft, cautious, full of breath. The beginning sounded like something lost, the pauses between chords saying just as much as the notes. Then, gradually, it warmed, grew more certain, more. Notes rose like questions being answered. There were stories in his hands, the nights spent alone with keys that stuck sometimes, the sound of his mother's voice in the kitchen murmuring prayers when she thought he'd fallen asleep, the shaky notes on the old rec center keyboard that still sparked if you touched it wrong. And as he played, the room shifted. Conversations halted. Phones were lowered. Heads turned. Something in the air leaned closer. His chest ached, eyes stung, but his hands didn't stop. He played all the way through, and when the final note rang out, he lifted his hands gently, like letting go of something that had carried him a long way. Silence. Then, a single clap. Another. Then the room filled with sound, loud, real. Some students stood. One teacher wiped away tears. Even the announcer looked stunned. Elijah stood, bowed, and quickly left the stage before they could pull more from him. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall, catching his breath. That was incredible. He turned. Preston stood there. No friends this time. Shirt tucked in, hair combed back. But the usual confidence had dimmed. "I didn't know you could do all that," he said. Elijah didn't reply. Preston shifted on his feet. "What I said before, that wasn't right." Still, Elijah stayed quiet. "I guess I just didn't expect it." Elijah looked at him then, calm. "You didn't have to." Preston nodded. "Yeah, that was it. No dramatic apology. No handshake. Just two boys in a hallway filled with everything unsaid." Miss Delacroix appeared moments later. "You did it," she said. He laughed, breathless. "I think I did. There's someone I want you to meet," she added. But before that could happen, someone in the crowd had already made a call. One that would lead to a door Elijah didn't know existed, one that was about to open. By the time their bus rolled back into the Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School parking lot, the sky was a watercolor of gold and purple. Elijah sat near the back, head against the window, watching Baton Rouge blur by. Fast food joints, gas stations, corner stores, familiar, safe, but smaller now. He hadn't spoken much. Some kids gave him high fives. Jamari nudged him and said, "Bro, you made the rich kids clap. That's magic." Elijah smiled faintly, but his chest still buzzed, not with nerves, not fear. Something else. Something without a name yet. At the bus steps, Miss Delacroix waited. "Elijah," she said, stopping him gently. "That woman I introduced you to, Mrs. Coldwell. She wants to see you again." He blinked. "Why?" "She runs a summer arts program, scholarships. She said, it's rare to find someone like you who hasn't had formal training." He looked down at his shoes, left one scuffed. "I don't have money for lessons." "That's the point," she said. "You wouldn't need any. Everything's covered. You just have to show up." He didn't know what to say. Opportunities like that didn't land in his lap, not without strings. I told her I'd talk to your mom, Miss Delacroix added. She'll want to know. That night, Charlene stood in the kitchen, brochure in one hand, burned grilled cheese in the other. Her eyes didn't say much, but the silence was loud. They're not trying to use him? She asked. No, ma'am, Miss Delacroix replied. They've done this all over the state. Charlene studied the paper again. And he'd stay? Where? In dorms, supervised, just for a few weeks. He'll be back by summer's end. Elijah sat on the couch, backpack still on. His fingers twisted the strap. Charlene looked at him, quiet. You want this? I think I do, he said, barely above a whisper. She sighed, that deep kind of sigh that meant her brain was moving faster than her words. He's 12, still a baby. I'll be careful. You better. She turned back to Miss Delacroix. I'll think on it. And for now, that was enough. A week later, the letter arrived. White envelope, blue trim, his name typed in the center. Elijah read it 3 times before handing it to his mom. She didn't say much, just nodded. He packed his things in a duffel too big for him. Miss Delacroix drove him to the campus herself, telling him about kids who'd gone through the program, some who never touched a real instrument until they got there, some who ended up at Juilliard, Berkeley. But none of them sound like you, she said. And I mean that. The school wasn't polished, paint chipped on windowsills, benches worn thin, but it felt honest.